one item that had come to mind for me was possibly headlights at nighttime for property owners coming back into the properties on the proposal, shining through the woods to Lamar, which they wouldn't have otherwise, and again, vice versa, headlights coming off of Lamar cul-de-sac and into new development in the woods. So it served sort of a number of purposes to put that forward, and again, the applicant said he was happy to do that. The item number 4, Saanich Engineering was proposing a traffic light, again in the Lamar cul-de-sac. There's a little grass landscape island in the middle, and the proposal was to have a traffic light in there. Street light. Sorry, street light. Yeah, no intersection. A street light in the traffic circle in the middle of Lamar, and again, it was for night lighting or night pollution. There's none there now, and the volume of traffic would be very minimal. And I think, as far as I understand it, engineering now has agreed that a traffic light would not be required in that location. And but as noted in the item number 4 here, probably some bollard lighting would be proposed for the communal parking area, because otherwise it would be quite dark in there. But just some down lighting for the bollards. I'm going to sort of be dwelling a little bit on this area of the proposal for a bit longer. It's the most significant feature of the proposal, and one that I spent a lot of time with the Lamar residents on. Item number 5 pertains to the proposed visitor parking, which is represented by these 4 stalls here. And the challenge with this proposal, there's virtually no opportunity for parking on Halliburton Road, none on Wesley, limited, I suppose, on Halliburton Place, and the residents of Lamar are hoping that there's little or no parking on their cul-de-sac. So as a result of that, the requirement for visitor parking is quite a bit more than you would typically find for a subdivision like this, and that's what these visitor parking stalls are representing here. My concern of those, for the benefit of the residents, was how to control the use of those, because those 2 lots on either side are strata lots, and there will be strata bylaws established as to what can happen in those lots. And I wanted to make sure it was nailed down very tightly, because otherwise the ideal parking spots for RVs or boats or trailers, or if one of the homeowners happened to be a general contractor, it might be a great spot to park the trucks at the end of the day and have the work crew arrive in the morning. And we wanted to make sure very definitely that that didn't happen with the use of those stalls. They're intended purely for residential parking and visitor parking only, and the goal was to keep traffic and parking off of the Lamar cul-de-sac. Item number 6, and there's only 10 items, so I won't be dwelling on this too much longer. Item number 6 talks about fill, the importing of fill or the movement of fill on property. Again, it pertains to these visitor stalls generally in this area and the property to the west. When you come in off of Lamar cul-de-sac, the property drops down quite quickly and probably about 3 meters over to the property on the west. And the objective was to obviously have a gradient off of the end of Lamar that was functional, where the cars didn't bottom out, and vice versa, when they were coming out, the headlights weren't pointing out to the sky. So the idea was to try and find a balance between cut and fill on that visitor parking area, and also to make sure that the root zones of the protected trees in that area weren't impacted heavily by that. And we've taken that into consideration, and the arborist is dealing with that as well. Item number 7, which pertains to construction of lots 2, 3, 4, and 5. And again, the concern, because of the limited parking, if none at all, on Halliburton as well as Wesley, is during construction, how to control construction vehicles so that Lamar doesn't become the preferred destination to access the site and park for the duration of the day and furthermore the duration of the project. So the applicant has agreed to work with all the trades to make that a condition, that access comes in off of Halliburton Place. as much as they can. Certainly there's going to be situations where they have to come in off of Lemaire, but the idea is to get the bulk of the traffic coming in off of Haliburton and parking in the site off of Haliburton, and as a result, try and have the Haliburton property developed last, and that's sort of your muster area and the place where contractors can come in and park and circulate. The next item, item number 8, pertains to this area along the south side of this property and the adjoining property, which is 4927 Lemaire. The owner of that property has asked, the owner of this property, has asked that the existing hedging and plant material along this side of the property be maintained as much as possible, but that a combination of existing hedging and a wooden fence be constructed along that property line. And the owner has agreed to do that. Much of the plant material in that area was originally slated to be removed, but there's certainly benefits to keeping plant material even if it's not protected trees. It provides bird habitat, it's immediate privacy, and it's just a good green screen to have, and the owner of that property would appreciate if that, as much as possible, could be left. And that brings me to the question of parking in general. You may notice in your agenda package that talks about 6 parking stalls per lot, which seems like a huge number for a residential subdivision. But again, because of the limited parking available on the streets, the concern, of course, is visitors and also the possibility of secondary suites in these units. So when that's taken into consideration, the quantity of proposed parking is perhaps not out of line. But on this particular property, there was 2 parking stalls proposed to go right in where that landscaping is now being requested to be retained. So we're relying on that property, which has 2 parking stalls in the garage, 2 out front, and access to the 2 visitor parking stalls in the communal area to be suffice for that property for the benefit of keeping the landscape. Item number 9, which I just touched on, is secondary suites, and that's something that has come up and was asked, would they be permitted? And it will be up to the homeowners to decide whether they have secondary suites or not. And number 10 was tree retention and what is being done with that. And it's being left largely to the project arborist, Tom Talbot, working directly with the Saanich arborist to determine the best method for protecting trees. There are some that have come up in discussion many times with the residents, for example, just to the right of the proposed entranceway, one off of Haliburton Place, and some various other trees on the site. And the approach that we're hoping to take is whether the tree is a protected bylaw tree or not, is to assess it on the site at the time, because if you look at the back of, well, I guess it's a little hard on this image, but the back of this property, there's a couple of trees here that are slated to be removed. But perhaps during construction, there is no need to remove those trees. So those numbers, I think, are a bit adjustable, and I always find it more productive to determine at the very end of the day what trees to be saved or not, based on the project arborist and the construction. And the last item that I wanted to touch on is the back of that property. And you may notice on your little drawing that it's a 60-foot rear yard setback, which is very large. And that was a request that was put forward by one of the property owners, this individual here, which is a panhandle access off of Haliburton. And originally that house was pushed further to the east. And there was concerns that the 2 houses having some overlap might impact on privacy. So the owner asked if we could push the house as far westward as we could, and that's the reason for the 60-foot rear yard setback on that property. So that concludes the 10 items, and that final one being the 11th, that form the bulk of the conversations with residents in the area. As I noted in the concluding paragraph of my report, the application is not perfect in every way, and I don't think any application is. We listened and we tried to address as many of the features as we can, and we've got a very willing applicant that is happy to work with the residents, both whether it's the decorative stone gates or hedging or retaining plant material, proposed fences and that sort of thing. So we're very much open to that and hoping that we can move forward, because this has been in the process, as I mentioned, for a very long time. So that concludes the presentation, and happy to answer any questions if they arise.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tinney. We have a question from Councillor Goodman. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Mr. Tinney, you mentioned the transit stop at Wesley Road in Haliburton. And we have a presentation provided us tonight, I presume from the neighborhood, that indicates that that stop is not included on that particular bus route and during the summer months, on the weekends, or after 5:30 p.m. Have you researched that, and is that accurate to the best of your knowledge?
I did, and it's kind of surprised me a little bit. I spoke with BC Transit, and I didn't get much of a response from them, to be honest, on the whole issue of would they like the applicant to supply some funding to upgrade that stop, the number of bus trips per day, weekends, that sort of thing. So because I didn't get much of a response or interest from BC Transit, I swung my attention back to Saanich Engineering and spoke to one of the design engineers about Haliburton Road in general, as opposed to the bus stop. And in speaking with some of the residents, they felt that while the bus stop is lacking, they would actually prefer monies and energies put into Haliburton Road, whether it's a bike lane, or even a pedestrian lane, or even a painted line down the side of the road. It's very unfriendly, whether it's bike or pedestrian on Haliburton Road right now, as you know. And they were hoping that we could perhaps put some effort into that. Engineering came back and said, good news that a master plan is in place for Haliburton and will be implemented in the not too distant future. But right now, there's no immediate plans to jumpstart the program, and nothing that's needed from the applicant at the moment.
So, back to my question. The information provided to us that the bus, in fact, does not stop there at those times is accurate?
Yes, that's. I don't remember.
Thank you.
I don't remember verbatim, but yes, that was roughly the response I got as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions from Council for Mr. Tinney? Councillor Haynes, go ahead.
If I may, the last point in your letter to Council, where you identify that some residents have hoped parking could be pushed further northward.
Right.
Could you just talk us through that point, please, and
Sure.
how you respond?
Sure. And I should probably mention too that prior to meeting with the residents on Lemaire, which very much drove a good portion of this design, this house here was actually accessing through the cul-de-sac as well, so there would have been 3 houses coming out onto Lemaire. We have since turned that around, and it's now, you can see a panhandle off of Haliburton. What they were hoping for would be visitor parking stalls to be moved further northward. And again, that would push the whole development, if you will, further northward, thereby further protecting the trees in that immediate area, and also further protecting that green screen, so that when you came into the Lemaire cul-de-sac, everything was recessed as far northward as possible. And we did move the property line northward into this area here, and subsequently that lot line then moved northward, and this lot became smaller. So yes, we did move everything northward as far as we could. I think the residents would prefer to see it even further northward, but it just wasn't possible.
If I may, through the Chair, through the Mayor. On item 7, we talk about all construction access coming in from Haliburton Road. The applicant understands the intent of this request and will endeavour to concentrate as much construction activity and traffic as possible from Haliburton, and will make this request a condition of the various contractors. I understand that. Could you give us some sense of the time to build? How long will the build process go, assuming it goes forward?
For all 6 houses?
Yes, please.
As soon as possible.
But in terms of duration, to build 6 houses?
Year and a half.
I guess it depends on sales and that sort of thing.
Nope.
No, you're just going to forge ahead and build. I see.
So it's a contained period of time.
Correct.
It's not that one house will be built and then the next house, and then later on the next house will be built, so it could drag on for years.
No, it sounds like all 6 are going to be built sequentially, and that will consume, as you heard from the owner, sort of 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
which I think is good news for the neighborhood.
It is, because it addresses part of that concern and puts a time limit on what they may be exposed to.
Absolutely, and you can see from the layout of the property, and if you're familiar with it, that, you know, certainly my background in construction, that Lamar would be the ideal spot to park the trailers, to bring in the dump trucks, to bring in the backhoes, to bring in everything on Lamar. So it's going to be fairly critical for the owner to do the best he can to bring the majority of vehicles and people in off of Halbert.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions for Mr. Tinney? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Tinney. And now I'll invite members of the public to come and speak in favor or against this application. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Please come forward.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm just going to get the second publication going here. So, thank you for your patience. My name is Laura Gurminski. I am one of the residents on the Lamar Place. We're not right next to it. We're one house away from the properties on the Lamar. So our goal is a very green solution. We were looking back at the documentation of the Blue Dot program, and Senate Councillor Susan Rice championed this program to reduce fossil fuels. And in February 2015, Councillor Member Fred Haynes said in a report that we find ourselves in an unprecedented moment in history. Our burning of fossil fuels has changed the basic chemistry of our planet. Our continued failure to act impacts the quality of life in our municipalities and jeopardizes the Earth's capacity to support life. Recently and proudly, Council unanimously supported the motion by Councillor Susan Rice that enabled Saanich to join other municipalities in declaring our citizens' right to a healthy environment. Excuse me for touching the screen. I have a touch screen that throws me off. So the Blue Dot program, of course councillors are all aware of it, is the goal is to reduce fossil fuels. If you reduce how do you reduce fossil fuels? You have less cars. Less cars produce less emissions, and you have a healthier environment. And how do we get less cars? We have less density in car-centered neighborhoods. Originally, we asked for 4 lots total, but we were told we can't have 4. Then we asked for 5, and again, we were told we can't have 5. The problem is Cordova Bay Ridge in infrastructure, we are a car-centered neighborhood, and there is no good public transportation, as Councillor Derman just pointed out. There is a bus stop there. It was my mistake, it's not number 32, it was number 35. But there is no service on weekends and after 5:30 p.m. The primary purpose of this route is for transporting students up to Claremont High School. So previously we discussed, and ad nauseum, in the last couple of council meetings about the transportation infrastructure cannot support more and more cars in this neighborhood. Simply by adding more density, we add more cars, and this is not in line with the Blue Dot program goals. So we are thrilled that Saanich is taking steps and actions towards a better and greener future. So our goals is if we can't have 4, we can't have 5, is how can we make 6 work and still make it a green solution to reduce fossil fuels, protect our environment, and maintain privacy. Our first communication by the developer, we had not been talking to the developer had not come to us even though we had asked him to, but finally 1 week after our February public hearing, Saanich Councillor Fred Hayes came and walked about our neighborhood, and he talked with neighbors and proposed a new plan. that they rotate Lot 3 180 degrees so that it's now panhandle off Halliburton Road, and that only 2 houses now remain off of Lemaire Place. Greg promoted this new proposal and advocated that the density problem was decreased. Well, the density problem on Lemaire was decreased, but emissions, environment, and privacy issues were still unchanged. About a week later, Mr. Tinney was involved, as he said, and he came and met with us. He opened the lines of communications. He got together with us Lemaire homeowners, which we really, really appreciated, and we felt our concerns were finally being heard. Everyone seemed to be, all the issues seemed to be resolved. And after our second meeting with Roger, he sent us an email that said, I spoke to James today. He's in agreement with everything we discussed. I'll have the design drawn up and we'll have it distributed to you so that we can move forward. That was wonderful. James, as Mr. Tinney just discussed, James had agreed to many of these items, so that was wonderful. The first one was specifically save designated trees. A lot of the trees that were along the periphery of the different lots we wanted to save because they were icon trees and they were great big trees. So if the houses were particularly placed in a certain area and the parking was placed in a certain area, more of those trees could be saved. And so we asked for some specific trees to be saved, especially the one right off the end of Lemaire Place because it's an icon and it's been here long before any of us have ever been here. So the concern we had with the heavy construction ones, I won't go through all of these because Mr. Tinney's already gone through it, but the heavy construction going over the root structure on tree number 031 at the end of the street would likely destroy that root structure. And so that was one of the big reasons we wanted not all the heavy equipment to come in off of our street. Also, Mr. Gardner let us talk to Talbot and McKenzie and Associates about how to save those trees, and a letter has been drafted up and that's also been included. So we appreciate that. Thank you, James, for doing that. We did also ask, as Mr. Tinney said, for the biking lanes, and as most of the residents, or I shouldn't say most, half the residents on Lemaire Place are avid bikers, and yes, they do drive up and down that big hill, pretty much on a daily basis. So that was important to us. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait, I guess. As Mr. Tinney also said, we asked for certain things, and James's response was indeed that these are items that are out of his control, and Mr. Tinney has addressed all those already, so no need for me to go through those. We thought things were going really well, and as we said, Roger's email said to us, I spoke to James today and he's in agreement with everything we discussed. But our disappointment came when the resulting notes he provided us did not include any reference to 2 of our key important issues. We had discussed them at length for well over 45 minutes, and they were not even mentioned on the notes, so we were quite disappointed at that point. The 2 issues were that ensure that careful placement of the houses and the parking spaces to ensure the trees promised to be saved could be saved, and this resulted in the need to move the parking lot further north. The other one, which has not been mentioned, is that we requested the zoning be RS12 for lots 1, 2, 5, and 6, and a covenant registered for an RS10 size housing and building. And the reason we wanted to, I'll go into that in just a second. So the 2 key issues were not addressed. I've listed these all already. So the first one is about the careful placement of the houses and parking spaces. So when the critical root zones are actually displayed on the drawing, you'll see that the area that they cover is, some of the trees is quite substantial. And one of the houses has an optimum placement on lot 5, and on April 28th, the revision that he gave us, that house was perfect, and I've listed the setbacks. But on the June 3rd diagram that we're now looking at, the excavation for house on that lot 5 will likely damage a significant portion of the tree root structure for 24 and 26, which would then likely cause their removal. And those are two of the trees that give the privacy to the resident on 797 Halliburton Road. We also asked for 2 parking spaces on the lot 5 to be moved to the Strata visitor area, but instead they were completely removed. Because we asked them for those 2 to be moved, and that gave us the reasoning for why we wanted to move the parking further north on the property line. The second one, we've asked for zoning RS12 on those particular lots because the larger offsets ensure more privacy for each of the neighbors. These are very narrow lots. The smaller building envelopes helps ensure tree roots will be less impacted by the excavation. The zoning would be in line with the existing adjacent properties, and higher zoning prevents further future development and subdivision possibilities. And this zoning would also be inconsistent with what was done in Story Lane. So this is the proposal put forward, and as you see, I've marked the 2 little red parking spaces that were there, but have been now have been removed from the proposal completely. We're asking them to be moved up into the visitor parking, instead of being completely removed. We're asking for that property line at the back to be moved further north to accommodate for that parking spaces. And we're asking, obviously, if that lot, if the lot there gets moved, then we want to move the other one further. I mean, that's up to the applicant, but just to make the distribution of the area a little easier. So we built a diagram that incorporates our key issues, these 2 issues that weren't addressed, that tries to manage the houses and the parking placement using 6 houses. So our drawing demonstrates the specific trees, the parking spaces, and the 6 houses can all indeed coexist. Nothing needs to be removed. So as you can see now, I've put the critical root zones. You can see those by the great big green circles on the diagram, and you'll see number 24. I don't know if you can see that right there. That one's number 24, and that's the one that, because the house currently is moved much further to the right or to the east, it would take out about a quarter of the circle in excavation. So we're asking you to move the house back even further west to prevent that from happening, and also to put the house back to a slight bit further south to save number 26, which is right there. Okay, as you can see, that one is the number 31, which we've asked to be saved, and that's why we want the smaller access. You can also see that at the end of the visitor parking, we've now put 6 parking spaces. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the top part is just the backing up area that is required, so that everybody can back up and move forward into the cul-de-sac. The other one is that line of trees and the berm at the end of the property. So all the property along Halliburton Road is now back in line where the original property line was. And of course, we moved that property line a little bit to make the houses a little more viable. Okay. We were quite surprised that the 2 parking spaces were removed, because the report from the Director of Planning, both in January 26th and the 11th, not 2105, 2015, recommended that they still include the 6 parking spaces, including the 2-car garage and on-site parking, but now those have been removed. So we, the residents of Lemaire, would be the ones who would pay the price of this, of having other people's parking all over in front. We're not asking for anything that we on Lemaire don't already have. We all have frontage, but these properties have zero frontage other than the access road itself. And that's why we maintain that visitor parking and all those parking are important. So why are we concerned? These parking stalls are being removed. I'm hoping council that will keep them. So Roger's email to us on June 3rd said, I've eliminated the 2 proposed parking. This allows for better privacy for Liz and less impact on the existing vegetation. Yes, thank you. But if the council insists that the 2 stalls be provided, which I doubt they will, I'll have to move the house slightly northward, which would then impact those trees. But as we said, we've shown that there are other ways to skin the cat, I guess I would say. Not that I don't like cats. So yeah, those ones are the 2 parking spaces that are being removed. Promises, covenants, and strata rules. We're concerned that by moving those 2 parking spaces, we're wondering how do these strata rules and covenants get enforced, and is it enough to be in the report from the planning director to be enforced at the time of construction and sign off? And those are the lists of things that have been promised. So back to our goals. We seem to be at a stalemate, and that's what Roger's email or letter said. And so we're hoping that parking can be pushed northward, and the applicant is saying that it'll reduce size 3 too much. So we come back to the Blue Dot program. This is for our benefit, for the benefit of our future generations. Developing properties involves risks, and building is a privilege, not a right. Gone are the days when we just logged it, burned it, and paved it. Environmental and personal health are now at the forefront, and the Blue Dot program, championed by Ms. Bryce, says that this is